You know that feeling when you drive somewhere using GPS? Like maybe to a new restaurant or a friend's
Mm.
new place.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You get there perfectly fine, right?
Mhm.
Not a single wrong turn. But if someone asked you to drive back there the very next day without your phone, you'd be completely lost.
You'd have no idea where you are.
Exactly. You outsourced the navigation, and because of that, you essentially outsourced your spatial awareness. You didn't learn the route, the machine just fed you instructions.
Right, and taking that driving analogy a step further, the real danger isn't just that you don't know that specific route.
Okay.
It's that over a long enough timeline of never navigating for yourself, you actually lose the underlying skill of reading the road signs or anticipating traffic patterns and, just orienting yourself in space.
Right. You forget how to navigate entirely, which, for driving to a restaurant, maybe we just accept that trade-off.
Sure.
But today we are looking at what happens when that exact same dynamic takes over our professional lives, specifically our leadership and management skills.
Yeah, this is a huge issue right now.
It really is. So today's deep dive is built around a really fascinating paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled, When Human Judgment Must Lead: Strategic Boundaries for AI in Management.
It's such a great read.
It's so good. And our mission today is figuring out exactly when using artificial intelligence makes you a brilliant, highly efficient leader and when it, well, quietly starts to erode your judgment and fracture your professional relationship.
Yeah, the double-edged sword.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. Where exactly are we right now with AI in the workplace? Because, we aren't talking about a niche group of early adopters anymore, right?
Not at all. The baseline reality in the source material is that roughly 65% of managers are already using generative AI on a weekly basis.
Wow, 65%.
Yeah, it is fully mainstream. People are drafting emails, prepping for meetings, synthesizing these massive reports, and even generating strategic options. But to really grasp what Dr. Westover is analyzing here, we need to draw a hard line between two concepts that sound similar but operate entirely differently: augmentation and automation.
Oh, I see this confusion all the time. People use the terms interchangeably.
Do, and it masks a massive shift in responsibility. So automation means the algorithm replaces the human effort entirely.
Okay.
Think of a system that looks at employee availability, generates a weekly shift schedule, and just publishes it without a human ever looking at it.
So the human is totally out of the loop.
Exactly. But augmentation, on the other hand, means the tool enhances your capability, but you remain firmly in the decision seat.
Okay, so you're still the boss.
Right. The system might draft 3 different schedule options based on complex variables, but you, the manager, review them. You apply your contextual knowledge about your team's dynamics, and you make the final call.
I see.
The fundamental assumption with augmentation is that the algorithm brings the processing speed, while the human brings the judgment and the accountability.
It's like the difference between having power steering and putting your car on full autopilot.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, like with power steering, the machine is doing the heavy physical lifting, making the wheel easy to turn, but your hands are gripped on that wheel. You are deciding when to turn.
Yes.
Autopilot is automation. You're just along for the ride.
Exactly. And the central tension of Westover's research is that the line between power steering and autopilot is highly unstable.
Because the tools are just so incredibly helpful.
Right. And because managers are universally pressed for time, there's this immense gravitational pull to use them for absolutely everything. And that inevitably leads to a phenomenon the paper calls drift.
Drift, like gradually drifting out of your lane because you're distracted.
That is the exact mechanism, yeah. Drift happens when a process that was explicitly designed to be AI-assisted slowly morphs into full automation, simply through human disengagement.
How does that actually look in practice, though?
Well, picture a busy manager who starts by carefully reviewing every single line of an AI-generated performance report. They are actively augmenting their work.
Right, they're paying close attention.
But the tool is pretty good. It rarely makes glaring factual errors. So the next week, the manager skims it a bit faster.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. A month later, they are basically glancing at the title and hitting approve. They haven't officially delegated the task to automation, but by incrementally disengaging their critical thinking, they have essentially erased their own oversight.
Man, if you are listening right now and you've hit approve on an autocomplete email today or accepted a Grammarly rewrite without actually reading the whole sentence, that is a micro version of drift.
100%. It happens to all of us.
But let me push back on this a bit because the source mentions controlled studies showing a 30 to 40% productivity improvement for knowledge workers using AI.
It's a massive gain.
That is massive. If we are churning out work that much faster and clearing our plates of all this administrative burden, isn't that a massive net positive for a company, even if a manager drifts a little bit on the details?
Well, the efficiency gains are absolutely undeniable, which is why companies are rushing to implement this. But the research points to the hidden costs of that unbridled efficiency. Specifically, a dynamic called the quality consistency problem.
Okay, what is that?
The reality is that generative AI reliably produces acceptable work. It's incredibly good at not being terrible, but it rarely produces truly exceptional paradigm-shifting work.
Because it's just operating on averages.
Right, it fundamentally operates on patterns and historical averages. So if your entire management tier relies heavily on algorithms to draft strategies and solve complex problems, you end up flattening your entire organizational output into what the paper brilliantly terms competent mediocrity.
Competent mediocrity. Wow, it's not failing, so it doesn't set off any alarm bells, but it's completely, utterly average.
And in a competitive market, average is a slow death. You lose the breakthrough insights, the creative leaps, and those highly contextual judgments that actually differentiate a great company from its competitors.
That makes a lot of sense.
And what's fascinating here is the internal psychological toll this takes on the managers themselves.
Right.
We are seeing a rising anxiety around a concept called de-skilling.
De-skilling, right. The fear that you are losing the ability to do the job you were hired for.
Exactly. I imagine it's terrifying to realize you haven't written a complex strategic document from scratch in 6 months.
And suddenly you aren't sure you still have the cognitive stamina to do it.
The panic of the blank page is becoming incredibly common. Managers are reporting a creeping unease that they are losing their hard skills.
Because they're mental muscles.
Yes. The ability to craft a highly persuasive piece of prose or sit down with raw data and synthesize it purely in your own mind, those are mental muscles. If you don't use them, they atrophy.
It's one thing to lose your own edge, but what really stood out to me in the source material was how this competent mediocrity impacts the people on the receiving end.
Oh, absolutely. The empathy gap.
Right. We're talking about the trust deficit. I was reading about that case study from Arizona State University in the text, and it perfectly illustrates this.
The ASU Academic Advisors case is a perfect real-world laboratory for this. You had a group of advisors who were understandably drowning in massive student caseloads.
Which is super common in higher ed.
Totally.
Right.
So to manage the sheer volume, they started utilizing generative AI to draft their email responses to students.
Which, from an operational standpoint, sounds like the perfect use case. You have high volume, you need to get accurate information out quickly, and the stakes for a routine scheduling email seem low.
Operationally, it was a total success. They were clearing their inboxes faster than ever. But the university quickly noticed a severe secondary problem.
Let me guess, the students noticed.
Yeah, the students reported feeling completely disconnected from their advisors. The relationship was degrading.
But how do the recipients even know? I mean, generative models today write highly polite, grammatically perfect emails. It's not like the old days of clunky robotic chatbots where the syntax was broken.
That's true. It reads very naturally now.
Right, so without a disclaimer at the bottom, how does a student know they are reading an AI email?
Well, they might not know it consciously, but the research shows that humans are incredibly attuned to subconscious personalization signals.
Subconscious personalization signals, like what?
When we read a message from a leader, a mentor, or an advisor, we are constantly scanning for shared history. We look for contextual nuances, a specific shared joke, or an emotional tone that is calibrated uniquely to our relationship.
And AI just strips that all out.
Systematically. AI-generated text, even when a busy manager gives it a quick skim and edit, systematically strips out those subtle signals. It defaults to an overly formal, sanitized tone.
Right.
The recipients in the studies describe these messages as professional but distant. And in leadership, distance is deadly for trust.
I mean, think about your own inbox. It's like receiving a perfectly formatted corporate greeting card with a printed signature versus a messy handwritten note on a Post-it.
Oh, absolutely.
The raw information conveyed might be identical, but the emotional resonance is entirely different. You know immediately which one took actual human effort.
And the corporate consequences of stripping out that human effort are severe.
Mm.
The source text actually brings up a highly revealing situation at Salesforce.
Oh, right, with their exit interviews.
Yes, they were analyzing their exit interviews and found that high-performing employees were quitting because they, quote, felt like a number. They were experiencing what they labeled impersonal management.
That's rough.
And when Salesforce dug into the underlying data, they found a strong correlation between these complaints and managers who were heavily leaning on AI for all their internal communications.
That is such a painful disconnect. The managers were probably patting themselves on the back thinking, I'm being so responsive, I'm sending weekly feedback summaries.
Yeah, while the employees were reading those summaries and thinking, my boss has no idea who I actually am.
So how did Salesforce handle that?
It forced them to completely restructure their internal communication guidelines. They developed a strict relationship communication protocol.
Okay.
They realized they had to formally divide managerial messages into two distinct categories, transactional and relational.
So a transactional message would be like scheduling a quarterly review.
Exactly. Scheduling, asking for a routine status update on a project, for those using an algorithm to draft it, is actively welcome to save time.
But relational is different.
Completely different. If it's a relational message delivering nuanced performance feedback, recognizing a specific achievement, or discussing career trajectory, it must be 100% human-generated.
Wow.
You simply cannot delegate relationship building to a machine and expect the relationship to survive.
That makes intuitive sense, but enforcing it seems incredibly difficult. I mean, in a high-pressure corporate environment where everyone is desperate for time, people will inevitably take the shortcut.
They will, which is why some organizations have to draw hard lines in the sand.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the Cleveland Clinic's approach really stood out to me as a brilliant way to map this out.
The Cleveland Clinic framework is one of the most robust examples in the paper of what Westover calls domain mapping,
Right. They operate in a high-stakes medical environment.
where efficiency saves lives, but a lack of empathy destroys trust.
Exactly. So they instituted an emotional load disqualifier.
I found that concept fascinating.
It really is. They basically said, look, if an algorithm can help optimize our surgical scheduling and route patient intake forms faster, we fully embrace it.
Sure, do the paperwork.
But if a task carries a high emotional load like delivering a serious medical diagnosis, discussing end-of-life care options, or even addressing a family's complex concerns, the tool is strictly prohibited.
You cannot use it to draft those communications.
Right. You can't use it to guide those delicate conversations. The sheer presence of emotional weight automatically disqualifies the algorithm.
It serves as a hard guardrail to guarantee that the most vulnerable moments in the patient journey remain entirely human interactions.
And Microsoft has taken a similar, though maybe more structured approach for their management ranks, right?
Yeah, they utilize a red, yellow, green deployment system based on how information-intensive versus relationship-sensitive a task is.
The green zone seems pretty obvious. High information, low sensitivity.
Correct. Green means AI use is actively encouraged. This covers market analysis, synthesizing competitor intelligence, or generating baseline reports on operational metrics. It's about crunching data.
Okay, and then you have the yellow zone.
Right, where the tool is permitted, but only with strict human review guardrails. This includes drafting project timelines or conducting initial candidate screening for an open role. You can use the algorithm to surface insights, but you must independently verify them.
And the red zone.
Red is strictly prohibited human-only territory. Final hiring decisions, performance evaluation ratings, team restructuring communications.
Wow.
Microsoft learned through their early internal pilots that allowing AI to influence these highly sensitive, deeply personal areas immediately fractured trust within teams.
I appreciate the clarity of a red, yellow, green system, but honestly, that yellow zone seems like a huge psychological trap.
How so?
Well, if I am a busy manager and I am permitted to use AI for initial candidate screening, I am going to lean on it hard. Establishing the rule is great, but human nature is fundamentally lazy.
You're not wrong.
So how do you actually enforce cognitive engagement in that yellow zone so managers don't just fall back into the drift we talked about earlier?
That is the million-dollar question for modern organizational design, and it requires battling a deeply ingrained cognitive flaw called automation bias.
Automation bias, meaning we just default to trusting the machine.
Essentially, yes. Decades of research show that when humans are tasked with reviewing algorithmic recommendations, we tend to accept them uncritically, especially if we are under time pressure or if the system has been generally accurate in the past.
We like to believe we are applying critical oversight, but we really aren't.
Right, our brains are heavily biased toward trusting the machine's output as the default truth.
It's like doing a complex math problem. If you try to solve it on a blank piece of paper, you really have to engage your working memory and logic.
Yes.
But if someone hands you a calculator that already has the answer 42 blinking on the screen and asks you to just verify if it's correct, it is incredibly difficult to spot a subtle error.
That's so true.
You look at the inputs, you look at 42, and your brain just goes, yeah, that seems about right. You want to use the calculator to check your own independent work, not let the calculator solve it from scratch while you just nod along.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah.
And because sheer willpower isn't enough to fight automation bias,
Hmm.
organizations are realizing they have to implement what the paper calls structural forcing mechanisms.
So basically forcing you to do the math.
Exactly. They have to physically design the workflow so that passive, nod-along review is literally impossible.
I was reading about BlackRock's approach to this in the financial sector, and it is intense.
Oh, the parallel path protocol.
Yes. For their portfolio managers who are making massive investment decisions, they instituted this rule. If a manager wants to use AI to analyze a specific market opportunity, they are mandatorily required to simultaneously write their own independent analysis without any assistance from the tool.
They have to build their own thesis first.
Right. And honestly, that sounds like double the work. I can imagine highly paid portfolio managers pushing back hard on that, arguing that it defeats the whole purpose of having an efficiency tool.
It absolutely introduces friction, and it is more work up front. But from a systemic risk perspective, it completely prevents the algorithm from prematurely anchoring their judgment.
Like you mentioned with the calculator screen, if you see the machine's answer first, your brain anchors to it.
Exactly. The parallel path protocol forces the manager to think independently. Only after both the human analysis and the AI analysis are complete are they allowed to cross-reference them.
And what if they disagree?
If there is a substantive difference, the manager has to formally document why they chose one perspective over the other. It structurally guarantees cognitive engagement.
It forces you to actually have an informed opinion before the machine politely tells you what your opinion should be.
Precisely.
But BlackRock is dealing with hard financial data. I'd argue that internal communication is even harder to police. You can't ask a manager to write two completely different versions of an email just to prove they thought about it.
You really can't, which is why Unilever's approach to communication is so clever. They introduced a modification requirement.
Modification requirement.
Yeah. If a manager uses a generative tool to draft an email that is going to be distributed to more than 50 employees, say a town hall announcement or a departmental policy update, they are mandatorily required to make substantive changes to the raw draft.
Oh, so no copy-pasting allowed.
None. They are required to inject their personal voice, reference specific organizational context that the algorithm wouldn't know, and demonstrate their relationship history with the recipients.
And is it just an honor system?
No, actually. Unilever's internal communications team audits samples of these wide-release emails monthly to enforce the rule.
Wow, imagine getting an email from HR saying your town hall invite sounded too much like a generic robot. That's kind of funny.
It is, but it forces the issue. If you are a manager listening to this, think about the friction that introduces. It forces you to actually read the words you are sending under your own name.
Because they recognize that the illusion of communication efficiency was actually hollowing out their leadership culture.
Exactly.
These safeguards, though, like the parallel path, the modification requirement, they make a lot of sense for seasoned executives who already know how to think critically.
Right.
But what about the 22-year-old junior analyst entering the workforce right now? Someone who used ChatGPT to get through college and has never known a corporate environment without these tools?
That is a huge concern.
How do they ever develop a baseline of good judgment if the machine is always sitting there ready to do the heavy cognitive lifting?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is perhaps the most existential threat highlighted in the research. We have to look at how human expertise actually forms.
Right.
The classic research by Anders Ericsson on skill development proves that expertise is not passively absorbed. It only comes from repeated, deliberate, difficult practice.
You have to put in the reps.
Engaging with messy, ambiguous problems, making poor decisions, feeling the pain of those mistakes, and refining your mental models.
There is no shortcut for the reps.
You have to put in the reps. And hyper-efficient tools threaten to completely short-circuit that developmental cycle by handing junior managers polished, ready-made answers.
And if they never have to wrestle with conflicting data sets or struggle to articulate a strategy,
They will never develop the deep, intuitive analytical judgment that senior leaders rely on during a crisis. Because of this, progressive companies are actually engineering what you might call an analog resistance.
an analog resistance sounds incredibly difficult to enforce in a modern remote work culture. How are companies actually pulling that off without grinding productivity to a halt?
They are doing it in highly targeted, deliberate bursts. McKinsey and Company, the global consulting firm, now holds quarterly analog days.
Analog days.
Yes. For an entire day, senior leaders, partners, and junior associates must do their client work, build their strategic recommendations, and draft their communications completely without any AI assistance.
I can only imagine the sheer discomfort of trying to build a massive strategy deck without your usual plugins and summarizers. The friction must be off the charts.
It is highly uncomfortable, and that is precisely the point. It serves a vital diagnostic purpose.
How so?
It establishes a quality baseline, proving to the individual that they still possess the unassisted cognitive stamina required to do the job. More importantly, participants report that these analog days make them hyper-aware of just how deeply dependent they've become on the tools.
Ah, I see.
It acts as a reset button, forcing them to be much more intentional about their tool usage for the rest of the quarter.
It's like a professional cognitive detox. You realize how much junk food you've been eating only when you force yourself to stop for a day.
That's a great analogy. General Electric is taking it a step further with their onboarding. They run an AI judgment practicum specifically for their newly promoted managers.
Notice the phrasing there. It's not a technical practicum on how to use the software. It's a judgment practicum.
Exactly. They give these new leaders highly complex, messy scenarios like navigating a difficult team conflict or addressing a sensitive performance issue.
And they don't just tell them to ask the AI.
Right. They don't teach them how to write the perfect prompt to solve it. Instead, they debate whether the algorithm should be used at all in that specific scenario. And if it is used, they workshop how to ensure the human element remains central to the final outcome.
They are actively teaching discernment.
They are treating unassisted critical decision-making as a core, premium competency that must be fiercely protected and cultivated, not as some old-fashioned inefficiency that needs to be optimized out of existence.
They're teaching them the hardest lesson in technology. Just because a tool can do something doesn't mean it should.
Precisely.
So, what does this all mean for you? Whether you manage a global team of 500 or you are just trying to manage your own daily inbox, it is worth pausing to audit your own habits. Are you suffering from drift? Are you letting the machine steer the car while you slowly forget how to read the road signs?
The ultimate takeaway from Dr. Westover's research is that the goal of a modern professional isn't to reject these tools.
Banning them outright would be professional suicide in today's hyper-competitive environment.
It really would. The goal is to deliberately cultivate what psychologists call metacognitive awareness.
Metacognitive awareness.
Yeah, you need to be actively aware of how you are thinking and when you are outsourcing your thinking. And one highly recommended, highly practical exercise from the text is judgment journaling.
Judgment journaling. I like the sound of that. How does it work?
It's remarkably simple, but very revealing. When you make a significant choice at work, approving a strategy, sending a sensitive email, evaluating a candidate, just jot down a quick note about how much the algorithm contributed to that final output.
Like, did I actively debate the machine's recommendation, or did I just accept it because it was 4 p.m. on a Friday and I was exhausted?
Exactly. Documenting this forces you to spot your own patterns of drift. The true test of modern leadership isn't going to be your prompt engineering skills.
Right.
It's having the wisdom to know exactly when to engage the algorithm for scale and exactly when to set the tool aside for the sake of trust.
Which brings up a fascinating thought to leave you with today. We are rapidly approaching a baseline reality where every single company and every single manager will have access to the exact same, perfectly optimized, instantaneous algorithmic outputs.
Everyone gets the same baseline.
Right. So, in a future where perfect and average is instantly available to everyone, will the most valuable, highly compensated skill in the marketplace simply be your unassisted, uniquely flawed, but entirely authentic human judgment? Think about that next time you sit down to draft an email to your team. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.